much. I think I can speak. Oh, there we go. Namaste, everybody. First of all, thank you so much for being here. I think I can speak for all of us when I say it means so much to us to see you all here together in celebration of Tripti Khali. My name is Arjun Roy. I'm a grandson, and I'll be the MC for today. Secondly, if you have already signed the guest book, thank you. If not, no worries, you'll have time to afterwards. A quick overview of this morning. We'll have a couple of recitations, a few speeches, and then some time to chat just out there with some light refreshments. To begin, I would like to call up Madhavi Angral to the podium. Come on. Thank you, Jim.
ज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुमिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामी इति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषशून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे। मङ्गलं भगवान् विष्णु मङ्गलं गरुडध्वज मङ्गलं पुण्डरीकाक्षाय मङ्गलाय तनोहरि। Translation. This is Vishnu mantra, which says, may auspiciousness be with Lord Vishnu. May all auspiciousness be with the one who has Garuda, eagle, as the flag symbol. May all auspiciousness be with the Lord who has eyes like the lotus flower, and all auspiciousness to Lord Hari, Lord Krishna. Om apavitraha pavitro va sarva avasthagato api va ya samritu punrikaksha ya brahmara antarana shuchihi. The translation. Om, if one is apavitra, impure, or pavitra, pure, or even in all other conditions, he who remembers Pundarikaksha, another name of Lord Vishnu, literally meaning with lotus eyes, he becomes pure outwardly as well as inwardly. Om Vasudeva Paraveda Vasudeva Paramakha Vasudeva Param Yoga Vasudeva Param Kriya Vasudeva Param Jnana Vasudeva Param Gataha Vasudeva Paro Dharmo Vasudevam Param Gati Vasudevam Param Gati. Oh. Translation. In the revealed scriptures, the ultimate object of knowledge is Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead. The purpose of performing sacrifices is to please Him. Yoga is for realizing Him only. All fruitive activities are ultimately rewarded by Him only. He is the supreme knowledge, and the severe austerities are performed to know Him only. Religion, dharma, is to render loving service unto His lotus feet. He is the supreme goal of human form of life. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This is Maha Mantra. Maha means the biggest of all. Mantra is the one which frees the mind, from from fear. Maha Mantra comprises of 3 words. Hare, the eternal potency of Krishna. Krishna, the ultimate reservoir, the attractive one. Rama, the ultimate reservoir of all pleasure. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Ishwaraha Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha Anadiradir Govinda Sarvakaran Karanam. Om. Translation. Brahmadev says, Krishna, who is known as Govinda, is the supreme Godhead. He has a blissful and spiritual body. He is the original of everything. He is the origin of all. He has no other origin, and He is the prime cause of all causes. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Angani yasya saklendriya vishamanti, pashyanti panti kalayanti chiram jaganti, ananda chinmay sadujjabal vigrahasya, govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. Om. Translation. I worship Lord, the primeval Lord, Govinda, whose transcendental form is full of bliss, truth, substantiality, and is thus full of the most amazing, dazzling splendor. Each of his limbs of that transcendental figure possesses in himself the full-fledged functions of all the organs, and eternally sees, maintains, and manifests the infinite universe, both spiritual and material. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Yadpada pallaha yugam vinithya kumbha davandehe pranama sammaya sangartitha viggana viruta alam asya jagattasya govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. The transcendental vibrations of this mantra is said to purify mind, body, and soul. The translation. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, whose feet are always held by Ganesha upon the pair of tumuli protruding from his elephant head in order to obtain power for his function to destroying all the obstacle in the path of progress of these 3 worlds. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. Srishti Sathir Palyah Padam Sakir Eka. Chayeva Yasya Bhavanti Bibharti Durga. Ichitanta Nur Upam Ati Yasya Asashesta Sena. Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Translation. The external potency, Maya, who is the nature of the shadow of the Chit potency, external potency of Krishna, is worshipped by all the people as Durga, the creating, preserving, and the destroying agency of this material world. I adore the primeval Lord, Govinda, in accordance with whom will Durga conduct herself. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Athavenu ninadasya traimurti mai gatihi suprunti praveveshashu mukha bhaja savayambuha gayatrim gayatrastamada ahigatra sarojaha samsakartas chadi guruna davijatam agamattataha. Om. Translation. Then Gayatri, the mother of Vedas, being made manifest, that is imparted by the divine sound of the flute of Sri Krishna, entered into the lotus mouth of Brahma, born from himself, through his 8 ear holes. The lotus-born Brahma, having received the Gayatri, sprung from the flute of none other than Lord Hari, Krishna, attained the status of the twice-born, initiated, having been initiated by the supreme primeval preceptor, Godhead himself, Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10, Yagya Nama Japo Asmi. Of all the yagyas, I am the primeval Lord, which is none other than the chanting of the holy names of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, verse 7, O conqueror of the world, Arjuna, there is no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me, as pearls are strung on a thread. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Madhaviji. We appreciate you so much. Next, I'd like to welcome to the podium my dad, Dr. N.C. Roy, Tripti Khali's son-in-law, to speak.
Thank you, Arjun. Namaste, and good morning to everyone. I thank everyone gathered here for attending today's celebration of life of Ma, Mrs. Tripti Khali. I feel privileged to have known her for the last 42 years and had the good fortune of sharing the same date of birth. We have happy memories of celebrating many of our birthdays together. It is very difficult to encapsulate a lifetime's worth of happiness in a few minutes. But I will try to highlight the two most important attributes of Ma, which I feel defines her life. They are love and compassion. She loved everyone and was, in turn, loved by all. Her love and compassion extended to her family, friends, friends of friends, and total strangers. And it was astonishing to see people, young and old, gravitate towards her at all times. They felt a certain kind of peace in her presence. One incident stands out for me over all these years. It was in 1998, and Ma was unwell and traveling alone from Calcutta to Hay River in Canada. We felt that I should meet her halfway at Heathrow Airport and escort her back to Canada. While sitting in the Heathrow Airport lounge during our long layover, she noticed an elderly Indian lady sitting alone, looking lost and forlorn. She insisted that I check on her well-being. I brought her over to where we were sitting, and needless to say, she was quite alone and bewildered in a strange and foreign airport. Ma asked me to bring 2 cups of tea, and in no time, both of them started chatting happily, sipping tea. Ma speaking in Hindi, and the other lady in Punjabi. Ma had no clue of Punjabi language, and the other lady had no clue of Hindi. But they had a good time. So you see, this one incident sums up Ma. Compassion for others, reaching out, connecting, and creating a bond. On a lighter side, I feel she had perfected the art of winning a person's heart through his stomach. An accomplished cook, her tasty pakoras, samosas, and pizzas endeared her to all. I remember my son's high school classmates in Hay River, camping in our basement, eating grandma's mustard fish and grandma's tea. Even today, after 20 years, they still talk about grandma's tea. Her appointments at my dental office were special, as my staff knew that she would bring pakoras for them, which they loved. So wherever she went, she made people happy. Ma is no more, but her legacy lives on. And in her absence, I can assure you, Krishna, Aditi, and Apoorna, that we, your Didi and I, will always be there for you. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you, Bob. Next, I'd like to welcome to the podium my cousin, Aniket Khali, Tripti Khali's grandson, to speak.
I wanted to take a moment before my speech to thank everybody who has supported and taken care of my grandmother directly or indirectly, particularly in her later years. Her death was the conclusion of a years-long decline in which many people did their part to make sure she could live and die with dignity. First to Dr. Noga, Dr. Bertozzi, and Dr. Afridi, alongside many other doctors and nurses who ensured her medical care whenever necessary. Second, to my aunts, Ratna, Boli, and Krishna Khali, to my uncle, Nikhilesh, to my cousins, Arjun, Amrita, Chinmoy, and Vinayak, my niece, Lakshmi, to Pushpa Benji, and to many others who have taken care of her and supported those who have these many long years. Most of all, I want to thank Lucy, who took care of her through many nights and attended to her many needs, always making her feel safe, comfortable, and secure in the confusion of old age, beyond what anyone in the family could have expected or asked. And to my mom, Apoorna, who has shouldered the most financially and emotionally, who has always tried to ensure she could stay at her home and always treated her as not just a thing to take care of, but as a complete human being. This kind of work is often very thankless, but in my opinion, it means far more to be there in life rather than in death. My grandmother was born on April 14th, 1936, in British-ruled India. When she was 3 years old, the Second World War started. She and her siblings were moved around lest their hometown be bombed. At 4, her biological mother died. She fortunately had a loving and caring stepmother, but such tragedies are not easily forgotten. At 7, the British-induced Bengal famine began. 3 million died, and she told me of the beggars asking for only the water that their rice was cooked in, knowing it was all that might be spared. And at 11, the partition of India happened, an event which did not personally affect her, but permanently marked her world. She was married to Ranjit Khali when she was 19 years old, who was, by all accounts, a profoundly decent person, and by her own account, very good-looking as well. My grandmother always described her own father to me as a magnanimous man, but never one to save. Her 20s passed partly in the anguish of him being bedridden with a stroke. She was, after all, the eldest sister of 9 younger siblings, her husband the eldest of just as many, and his family less well off than her own. At the same time, she had to withdraw from university and give up her lifelong dream of becoming a school teacher of Bengali literature and history. Her own ambitions were second to the men of her family. And at the same time, she had 4 daughters whose ambitions she and my grandfather always supported, whose existence, relatives, and passers-by were always quick to point out as in need of marriage and fast. Her mother-in-law stormed out of the hospital at the birth of my own mother, for my grandmother, in the midst of sepsis, had the audacity to birth a 4th daughter. Much of the middle part of her life passed by with ups and downs, but things took a turn for the worse in her late 50s again. Her husband was diagnosed with and eventually died with a cancer in 1993, which, had they had more money or lived in a country with better health care, would have been entirely treatable. At the same time, her own daughters went through varying degrees of turbulence in their own lives, job insecurity, immigration, issues in personal life, health, and so on. While she, a highly social person, was stuck living alone for years until she immigrated to join my mom and eldest aunt in 1998. I, of course, did not enter my grandmother's life until more recently, when she was already in her 60s. We had our disagreements and she her flaws, but I can't honestly ever say I felt even a hint of bitterness or insincerity in her behavior toward me. On the contrary, I only ever found a seeming infinite reservoir of love, kindness, and care. She never really yelled at me, and if she was upset, it was almost always for a good enough reason. My family didn't really have much when he immigrated, and a lack of social supports meant my mom had to spend my childhood working. Much of the time, it was my grandmother who played with me, taught me, spent time with me, and raised me. She was, until I was an adult, the only truly close relationship I knew. I don't think it was until I was much older I understood how lucky I was to have had someone like her as my grandmother, because she tried her very best to live a life that was full and share it with others. She was well-read in literature, philosophy, history, and religion, and well-thought in whatever she had to say. She had an argument or insight ready to back her beliefs, about which we did often argue. And yet, she was almost always open to learning new things. In her 80s, I taught her the basics of using an iPad, and I would occasionally get texts impressively lacking in any use of a backspace or spacebar otherwise. She used to tell me, and I still find it irksome, of how her aunts would chide her father for educating his daughters. But she never held the same ill will I did, and could only pity that her aunts simply did not know better. For all the difficulties in my grandmother's life, she was never one to not see nor forget the vulgar disparity of life around her. One of my most vivid memories of visiting India is watching others swat away hungry children like flies. In my experience of knowing people who grow up there as elsewhere, many must learn from a young age to not look, not feel, and not sincerely worry about the immense poverty around them. And somehow my grandmother did not learn. She supported what organizations she could, donated where she could, and gave to people on the street when she could. She would, into her late 80s and decades after immigrating, still break down crying at the thought of others' misery she knew existed. I think it's often in the extremes of life we say something like words cannot describe, and for all I have said, I still find it quite remarkable beyond description to even have the faintest idea of what she has gone through without ever turning bitter or insular. So, thank you.
Thank you, Aniket. Appreciate it. Next, I would like to welcome to the podium my daughter, Lakshmi Roy, Tripti Khali's first great-grandchild, to speak.
Om Bhur Bhava Swaha Tatsavitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimai Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Bhur Bhava Swaha Tatsavitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimai Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Bhur Bhava Swaha Tatsavitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimai Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Thank you. Now I'd like to tell you a couple of my favorite stories about Anna. So one thing I've always appreciated about Indian culture is the respect for all living things and the harmony between humans and the natural world. Growing up, Anna took care of many different animals. Some were orphaned in the nearby jungle, including cats, dogs, goats, bears, tigers, peacocks, and cockatoos. Animals, like the bears and tigers, were sent to wildlife sanctuaries once they were older, since they were still wild animals, but in the meantime, they were well taken care of. All the animals were treated with love, care, and respect. They ate chicken, mach, bhat, dal, and payesh. They were considered part of the family. One of the goats was named Bandhu, meaning friend. Many years later, in Hay River, Anna went on a fishing trip with her brother from London and some of her family. For an entire day, they didn't get even one bite. Anna, meanwhile, read her book of prayers. As they were about to leave, Anna, having finished her book, grabbed a fish out of the water, blessed it, and let it go. Somehow, this encapsulates who she was. I love her and miss her. Om Shanti.
Thank you, Lakshmi. Dida loved you so much. Every time I went to visit her without you, she would always say how proud she was of you and how much she loved you. I'm so thankful that you got to spend the last few years with her. Next, I'd like to welcome to the podium my aunt, Dr. Apoorna Khali, one of Tripti Khali's daughters, to speak.
Namaste, everybody. Hari Bol. When Arjun asked me to say a couple of words about my mom's life, I was overwhelmed at the thought of even trying to describe how much she meant to me. Instead, I thought I would share some pearls of wisdom and experience that show how she has been the anchor throughout my life. The most important thing to my mother has always been education. She always encouraged me to study hard and do my best in classes and exams, reminding me that you can't just study the night before, but need to prepare year-round to do well in anything. Sometimes I would be overwhelmed at the exams I had to write in India, in United Kingdom, in Canada, in US, and she would repeat a teaching from her own English professor, Mrs. Perensi Mehta, from her time at Jamshedpur Women's College in India. Whatever is difficult, go through it. She always was overjoyed to hear about my successes. She also taught me throughout my life to be a decent human being. No matter what I did, whatever I achieved at work or in life, none of it would matter unless I was ultimately a good person at heart. She taught me the importance of understanding others and empathizing with them and standing with them in hardship. More than that, she reminded me of the importance of doing something memorable and leaving a mark. Even that would just be an act of kindness. My life has been full of challenges and hardships. One of them being a single mom to my son, Aniket. Mom always stood by me while I had to work day and night to establish my life in Canada, and in many ways was his main parent. She taught him my mother tongue, Bengali, and taught him how to read and write in it too. She supported him in his studies, different activities, enjoyed coming to his piano festivals, always encouraging him to do whatever he wanted. Her only request to me was to cut back my practice and come home early to spend some time with him. Unfortunately, I was never able to do that due to my crazy amount of work I had to do. She always reminded me that ultimately all difficult situations will pass. In 2010, I was stuck with pretty serious cancer. I had to go through a year-long treatment, including chemo, surgery, and radiation. My mom was my main pillar of support then, saying, "Kuch bhi hoye, haste raho." In Hindi, that means whatever happens, keep smiling. Any physician working in Grand Prairie knows how hard and how much we work here. I would come home after working all night, having to leave again in the morning for my clinic. But my mom would remind me to take a nice shower, to put on fresh clothes and makeup, eat a nice breakfast, and always succeeded in making me start my days fresh and content. My mother always reminded me to be a charitable person. For one, she was extremely generous in her personal life, always hosting people, friends, family, my colleagues, and cooking huge amount of foods for them within a couple of hours. Every January, she would send money to charitable organizations like Ramakrishna Mission, Bharat Sevashram Sangh, and so on. She would always encourage me to donate to the local temple and donate to help humanity anywhere on earth. She was a deeply religious, and from that drew immense strength in her own life. In later years, when she couldn't read very well, I would read religious scriptures to her, and she would still correct or complete any part I failed to. One time, when returning from a trip from Spain, her baggage with her deities, which she always used to carry in a little bag, was mistakenly sent elsewhere. The next week was a nightmare in our house. While my brother-in-law, Dr. Roy, was calling every airline to recover her luggage, it later arrived after going through Paris, Portugal, and other parts of Europe, which my mom sighed about and remarked that the deities, her baby Gopal, must have wanted to see these places themselves. The final thing I learned from her was that in order to find peace, not to linger on faults of others, but just to connect with yourself and with nature. Having graced us by living with us for nearly 25 years, she has empowered me with many teachings and support. I will miss her lots. Thanks everybody for joining us today. Hari Bol.
Thank you, Rakimashi. I'd now like to welcome to the podium my mom, Dr. Ratna Boli Roy, Tripti Khali's eldest daughter, to speak.
Namaskar. Growing up as a girl child in India, when I did, was a challenge. The whole world did not offer many opportunities to girls and women, nor encourage us to go to school, pursue an education or a career. Some people in our community had ostracized Ma for having 4 daughters and no son. They implied that there must be something wrong with her. Some well-meaning relatives, friends, and neighbors suggested that rather than educate her daughters, she should just marry us off. My rebel parents did just the opposite. They went against the societal norm and instilled in us the value of education, self-motivation, hard work, and perseverance, regardless of the gender. I shudder at the thought of what stress my parents must have gone through to stick to these beliefs. This 4 feet 11 inches, extremely soft-spoken woman was like a lioness, fiercely protective of her cubs. My parents never let us feel any lesser for being girls. On the contrary, they supported us. They assured us that girls could achieve anything they wanted to. Talk about forward thinking. That was the foundation that our lives were built on. Due to this upbringing and these lessons, we were able to reach for the stars, to pursue our dreams, our education, to cultivate our own careers, and travel across continents. I owe everything to my mom and dad. On a different note, her spice-loving taste buds never quite got used to the local food. I remember this one time, we as a family went out for supper at a local restaurant. Not to hurt our feelings, Ma joined us after a lot of persuasion. When her food arrived, imagine our surprise when she quietly untied the corner of her sari where she had carried a couple of extra hot Thai chilies that she added to her dish. Never complaining, always finding a middle ground to please everyone. That was my mom. Thank you so much for coming. Namaskar.
Thanks, Mom. Now for something slightly different. I'd like to ask to play a video sent in from afar. These are two of my sister's kids, Hendrik and Usha, with some words for us.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Ram, Hare. Love you, Bharatita. Love you, Bharatita.
Amazing. In closing, there's always so much to say, and thank you everyone for speaking as you have, for sharing your memories and everything. It means a lot to us. I know it's already been said, but I want to acknowledge all who looked after my grandma and took care of her in recent times, from Lucy, all the doctors and nurses and hospital staff, the folks at the care center, to my aunties, of course, my mom, cousins, the Indian community, and everyone else. Thank you. I also want to acknowledge the greater Indian community here in the Peace Country. Your company, your support, your celebration of festivals, the sharing of wisdom, and our culture with everyone meant the world to my grandma. As my cousin mentioned, Tripti Khali began her life in British-occupied India in 1936, lived through World War II and the partition of India, all before she was my daughter's age. I know that for many of us here, our parents, our grandparents, and other relatives share similar experiences, and to have made it through and to be here now means everything. Thank you. My grandparents had a tough life. They faced many hardships and they persevered. They raised 4 amazing and accomplished daughters, helped raise many more children, cousins, grandkids. I know that the saying is that it takes a village, but in some way I think that maybe my grandma raised that village and fed them too. It's easy to point to material success as success, but I want to recognize that my grandma's family, her siblings, her children, grandchildren, and more have found happiness in life in India, in Canada, and abroad. Their families, they have families, children, grandchildren of their own. They work across many professions, from medicine and trades through finance, teaching, and the arts, and that is an amazing accomplishment. There's so many things that I appreciate about her and will miss dearly, but some of the things that I felt every single day, even through living a life as momentous, as much of a roller coaster as hers had been at times, were her constant, thoughtful kindness, acceptance, love, empathy, and grace. The world didn't wear her down or harden her against it. She was always herself, open, heartfelt, and positive. All I can say in closing is what I remember Dida saying to everyone all the time, and maybe it's a very simple secret to a life as happy and full as hers, and that's Khush Raho, be happy. Om Shanti. Thank you, everyone. Please join us across the hall for some light refreshments. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.